Ever feel like, your brain's kind of working against you? Like, you should be more rational, but those mental gremlins just keep popping up.
Yeah.
Well, you're in for a treat today because we're diving deep into the rationality checklist from the Center for Applied Rationality.
CFAR.
Yeah, CFAR.
Mm-hmm.
It's packed with techniques to help us kind of outsmart those mental traps and level up our thinking.
What I find fascinating about this checklist is that it's incredibly practical.
Right.
It's not just about abstract theories. It's about real-world tools and strategies you can actually use.
Exactly. And what's cool is that you'll hear about people using these techniques in everyday situations,
Right.
sometimes with surprising results.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
The first section tackles how we react to evidence and surprises.
The foundation of rationality is awareness.
Okay.
Noticing when something feels off or confusing.
Mm-hmm.
What CFAR calls flagging beliefs for examination.
Right.
This can have real-world consequences.
Oh, yeah.
As the story of the person who missed their flight demonstrates.
Oh, no.
They skimmed an email saw tomorrow and assumed it referred to their planned departure day.
Oh.
Turns out a closer look would reveal the discrepancy.
Ouch. That's a reminder to slow down and double-check those details.
Yeah,
Don't let assumptions lead you astray.
for sure.
This checklist is already making me rethink how I approach everyday situations.
And it's those seemingly small oversights that can really trip us up.
Yeah.
And this ties into another key point, welcoming or at least not shying away from bad news.
That sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah,
Our natural instinct is to avoid unpleasant information, right?
it is. But think about it this way.
Uh.
The CFR team noticed they hadn't been actively fundraising at their summits.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially bad news, right?
Yeah.
But they reframed it.
Okay.
They realized this didn't change the amount they had already raised. It just meant there was room for improvement and potentially even more fundraising in the future.
So a dose of bad news can actually be a good thing if it highlights areas where we can grow.
Exactly.
It's all about perspective.
Reframing is a powerful tool for staying rational and proactive.
I like that.
But being aware and reframing is just the beginning. Once we notice something's off,
Mm-hmm.
we need to dig deeper.
Okay.
That's where the next section comes in, questioning and analyzing our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to just react. We need to understand why we believe what we believe.
The checklist recommends visualizing both sides of an argument to overcome defensiveness. I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah,
We all tend to cling to our own perspectives, right?
absolutely. But that can blind us to other possibilities.
Yeah.
The Amanda Knox case is a perfect example.
Okay.
After hours of interrogation, she was seen doing cartwheels in her cell.
Oh, wow.
The prosecutor argued this was evidence of celebrating a murder. But couldn't that same behavior be interpreted as coping with stress or boredom?
It definitely could.
Right.
Just thinking about both scenarios side by side highlights how easily our interpretations can be swayed by pre-existing beliefs.
For sure.
It's a good reminder to always challenge those initial reactions.
Building on that idea, there's the concept of prior probability.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Before jumping to conclusions, ask yourself, what's already most likely in this situation based on what I know?
Okay.
It helps you avoid those knee-jerk reactions.
Like hearing a noise in the attic.
Yeah.
My first thought might be it's the wind, but if I live in an area with lots of squirrels, maybe a squirrel is more likely.
Exactly.
Considering the context helps us make more rational judgments, right?
Precisely. It's about looking at the bigger picture, not just what seems most obvious at first glance.
Yeah.
This applies to all sorts of decisions, from the mundane to the life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so far, we've focused on external factors, but a huge part of rationality lies in understanding our internal world. Those moments when different parts of ourselves are at odds.
Right.
That's where we get into the fascinating territory of inner conflicts.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah,
My brain can feel like a constant tug of war.
that's a good way to put it.
This checklist refers to it as belief versus anticipation divergence. It uses a pretty wild example.
Okay.
Imagine you're about to do a wire-guided fall from a building.
Oh, wow.
You know it's safe, but your gut screams, danger!
Yeah.
That's your head saying yes while your feelings are yelling no way.
That's a great way to put it.
It shows how strong those instinctive reactions can be.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the checklist offers ways to navigate those inner struggles.
It does. One technique is to reframe decisions to minimize bias.
Okay.
For example, let's say you're considering a move to a new city for a higher-paying job, but you're hesitant because of the upheaval involved.
Classic status quo bias,
Yeah.
right?
So to counter that, try flipping the script.
Okay.
Imagine you're already living in that new city, Would you be willing to take a pay cut to move back to your current location?
Ah, I see what you mean. That reframing forces you to honestly evaluate what you truly value.
Exactly. Sometimes simply asking that question can help us see more clearly what we want.
This is giving me a lot to think about already, but I have a feeling there's even more to unpack in this rationality journey, right?
You're absolutely right. There's a lot more ground to cover, and we'll be exploring some truly game-changing techniques in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into the rationality checklist. Last time we talked about everything from recognizing subtle biases
Right?
to managing those inner conflicts that can make decision-making feel like a wrestling match.
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear what other practical tools this checklist has in store.
Well, remember how we discussed the idea that we don't possess magic free will,
Right.
that we're often on autopilot, influenced by habits and subconscious biases?
Yes, it was a bit of a humbling realization that our brains aren't always as rational as we'd like to think.
It certainly challenges our assumptions.
Yeah.
Building on that concept, the checklist introduces the technique of using the outside view. It's about stepping outside of our own limited perspective and looking at our situation more objectively, as if we were an impartial observer.
So kind of like removing the emotional lens we tend to view things through.
That's a great way to put it. We often get caught up in our own circumstances and forget that others have likely faced similar situations.
Right.
The checklist uses the example of someone who intended to call their parents weekly, but kept putting it off. They realized their brain was saying, I'm too busy today.
Yeah.
But then they applied the outside view.
They ask themselves, is this day truly any different from any other? Will I magically be less busy tomorrow?
Precisely, that shift in perspective helped them see they were just procrastinating.
Right.
It's a way of holding ourselves accountable to our own goals.
It's like calling out our own excuses, isn't it?
Yeah.
What other strategies does the checklist offer for those internal battles we were talking about earlier, where different parts of ourselves are pulling in opposite directions?
It suggests focusing on which considerations are truly consequentialist. In other words, which ones actually involve future consequences, not just our immediate emotional reactions.
I remember the example about the person struggling with the sunk cost fallacy, agonizing over buying a new mattress after a previous one didn't work out.
Exactly. They felt like they'd already wasted money, so buying another mattress felt unjustified.
Yeah.
But by focusing on the consequentialist aspect, they realized the money already spent was irrelevant to the current decision.
Okay.
The real question was, will a new mattress actually improve my sleep in the future?
It's about cutting through the emotional noise and focusing on what will truly make a difference moving forward. This is giving me some seriously helpful mental decluttering strategies.
That's the beauty of this checklist. It provides a framework for making more rational decisions, even when emotions are running high.
Speaking of emotions, how do we actually change those ingrained behaviors and habits we talked about? You know, those patterns that aren't really serving us well but are so hard to break.
It's a common struggle, and the checklist acknowledges that change is rarely easy. But it offers some clever strategies.
Okay.
One is to leverage humor to combat the sunk cost fallacy.
Like the person who joked about wasting their grapefruit juice.
Yeah.
It seemed like a silly example at first, but now I see how using humor can lighten the mood and make it easier to make the rational choice.
It's a surprisingly effective approach.
Yeah.
Humor can disarm our resistance and make those tough decisions feel less daunting.
I'm starting to see that a little levity can go a long way in this rationality journey. What about the inner pigeon analogy?
Yeah.
That one really stuck with me.
It's a memorable way to think about the part of our brain that craves immediate gratification, that wants to indulge in junk food procrastination,
Yeah.
and all those tempting but not so helpful things.
We're all familiar with that little voice, aren't we? The one that whispers, just one more episode, or maybe tomorrow.
Exactly. But we also have a more rational side that understands the importance of long-term goals and healthy habits. The key is to find ways to reward our inner pigeon for making the choices that align with our rational goals.
So celebrating those small wins and acknowledging our progress, even if it's just taking a small step in the right direction.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we're not perfect, but we can make progress by understanding how our brains work and using that knowledge to our advantage.
Right.
And this circles back to the idea of not relying on magic free will.
Yeah.
We're much more successful when we set up systems and incentives that make it easier to make those good choices, rather than simply relying on willpower alone.
This makes me think about the example of the person who bribed their friend to encourage them to write in their journal each night. It sounds funny, but it highlights how creative we can get in overcoming our own weaknesses and sticking to those goals.
Absolutely. We could use our social circles, our environment, even a little bit of humor
Yeah.
to nudge ourselves towards the choices that align with our values and aspirations.
I'm really seeing how this checklist encourages a shift in mindset, a way of approaching life with more awareness and intentionality.
Mm.
It's not about being perfect, it's about being deliberate in our actions and choices.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And as we delve deeper into the remaining techniques in the next part of our deep dive,
Hmm.
I think you'll find even more ways to integrate this intentional thinking into your daily life.
Welcome back to our Rationality Odyssey. We've been exploring the Rationality Checklist
Hmm.
and uncovering some truly insightful techniques for upgrading our thinking. It's amazing how these concepts apply to so many aspects of life,
Yeah.
even those pesky everyday challenges like procrastination.
Procrastination is a universal struggle.
Yeah.
We all have those moments where we know we should be doing something but just can't seem to get started.
Yeah.
The checklist offers some practical strategies to overcome this inertia.
One that resonated with me was focusing on the information value of taking action. I
Right.
remember we talked about that in the context of trying new things, that
Mhm.
even if we fail, we gain valuable information.
Yeah.
How does that apply to procrastination?
Often we procrastinate because we fear failure or uncertainty.
Right.
We get bogged down by potential negative outcomes,
Yeah.
which paralyzes us.
Okay.
But if we shift our focus to the information gained by simply taking that first step,
Mm-hmm.
the task becomes less daunting.
So even if we don't nail it on the first try, we learn something valuable that informs our next attempt.
Exactly.
It takes the pressure off needing to be perfect from the get-go.
Precisely. And sometimes that initial step is all it takes to break the procrastination cycle.
Okay.
Once we get moving, it's easier to stay in motion.
It's like that saying, a body in motion stays in motion. This checklist is full of these little nuggets of wisdom. I'm also curious about the technique of conditioning yourself to enjoy work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my to-do list doesn't exactly spark joy.
It's about creating positive associations with the tasks we're avoiding.
Okay.
Remember the example about sending emails?
Yes, the person who visualized all the potential negative outcomes each time they hit send.
Instead of dwelling on those negatives, they started smiling every time they sent an email.
Okay.
By associating the task with a positive emotion, they changed their perception of it.
It's a simple shift, but I can see how powerful it could be. It's like tricking your brain into enjoying those tasks you used to dread.
That's the idea. Speaking of mental tricks, remember prior probability.
How likely something is to be true before considering new evidence?
This can be incredibly helpful in overcoming procrastination. We often overestimate the likelihood of negative outcomes leading to those worst-case scenario spirals. But if we objectively assess the prior probability of those negative outcomes, we often realize our fears are exaggerated.
So if I'm avoiding making a phone call because I'm worried the person will be angry, I should ask myself, how likely is it based on past interactions that they'll actually react that way?
Exactly. It helps to ground our anxieties in reality and make more rational decisions. This checklist is giving us a whole arsenal of mental tools.
I know, right?
But ultimately, it all comes back to that idea we discussed earlier, the myth of magic free will.
The recognition that we're not always as in control of our thoughts and impulses as we'd like to think.
And that's okay. It just means that instead of relying solely on willpower, we should create systems and environments that support our goals.
So if I want to eat healthier, I stock my fridge with healthy options and avoid keeping junk food in the house.
Right.
No more relying on willpower alone to resist temptation.
Precisely. Or if I want to exercise more, I schedule it in my day and create an environment that makes it easy to get started.
Yeah.
This checklist is all about recognizing our limitations and working with our brains, not against them.
It's such a practical and empowering approach. This entire deep dive has been a fascinating journey through the rationality checklist.
Yeah.
We've covered so many techniques for improving our thinking, making better decisions, and overcoming those everyday challenges that can trip us up.
It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you. Remember, the key is to keep practicing these techniques to make them a part of your daily life. It's not about achieving some perfect state of rationality, but about continuous improvement and self-awareness.
It's a journey, not a destination. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. I hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity and given you some new tools for navigating life's complexities if you're interested in learning more. The CFAR website has a wealth of resources.
And remember, the most important takeaway is to keep asking questions, challenge your assumptions, and strive to make decisions that align with your values and aspirations.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.